Hello and welcome to another edition of the Globalistic Transfer Special. All this summer we've been looking at the ins and outs at Rangers and Celtic, and today it's the turn of Brendan Rodgers' side. And joining me, Craig Turnbull, to discuss the latest comings and goings is David Friel. And David, how are we doing today?
Good, all good. A busy summer. Nearing the start of the domestic campaign, but I think a lot more transfers to come.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. And coming up, we'll look at potential targets for Celtic and whether more players could leave. But first, we're heading out to Lake Como, where Chief Football Writer Robert Grieve is based, following the team. And David, you spoke to him a little bit earlier.
Certainly did.
And we'll hear what he has to say now.
Robert, thanks for joining us. How's life in Como? Can you bring us up to speed with how you're enjoying your time in Italy?
A little wetter than I like, David, frankly. Beautiful weather yesterday. I was annoying some folk with some video footage of a little trip down Lake Como. But as I think as Celtic fans and other people would have seen last night, the heavens open, thunder and lightning. You can maybe hear it there in the background. It's continuing this morning. So yeah, not quite the temperatures we were hoping for, but we're here to work, David. We're not here to lie in the sun.
Exactly. We will get on to the game. Ajax 5, Celtic 1 in a little while. But since you've been there, spoken to Brendan Rodgers twice, transfers are clearly a theme. Transfer strategy, he was very clear, saying he's calling the shots, he makes all the decisions. And then after the game last night, where it's clear Celtic are still lacking, especially in that forward area, he was pretty blunt. Brendan Rodgers will show the back page of the paper today, show some ambition. It's your stuff, Robert. Can you just bring us up to speed? I think Brendan Rodgers was asked about the transfer strategy and said it depends what your ambition is. If your ambition is to progress and push forward, then we need to improve the squad. What was your take on the whole thing?
Yeah, but it's a continuation of our theme, isn't it? The way Brendan Rodgers has spoken about transfers and the kind of policy, the strategy that Celtic have. Certainly in this window and even last window, I think as well, it was very much the same thing, that he wants to drive the ambition of the club. He wants to drive the standard and the quality of player that he aims to bring into the club. But as I say, it's been a theme. We've been speaking to him regularly about the situation in terms of what's coming in, what he expects to come in. They've made a few signings, but it's clear to me that the signings who have come in are not in his mind for the here and now. They've made some good signings. Kieran Tierney apart, and Benjamin Nygren apart. But there are others. Hayato and Amura who's come in. It was looked upon as maybe the left back that Celtic were looking for. I don't think that's the case. Callum Osmond, a striker who's come in again. At the time, they've paid a decent amount of money for him. Again, he's not the striker Brendan Rodgers is looking for, and there's going to be a winger has to come in for Nicholas Kuhn. So his comments, I think, have gradually increased as the days go on in terms of the points that he's trying to make. But when Brendan Rodgers, manager of Celtic, is talking about how there has to be ambition, I don't know. I don't think you have to look too deeply into those comments to see what he's kind of leaning towards.
Listen, you can debate Celtic's transfer strategy, ambition and everything, but do you think this is maybe down to the fact that this Champions League playoff, the clock is ticking towards it? As we speak right now, Robert, Celtic have 25 days before those the start of that European tie, which is going to be worth so much money potentially to the club. And if you look at it, Celtic last night in the wide areas, the forward areas, Marco Tilio, come on, James Forrest, who have been a great servant for Celtic, but I think everybody would recognise probably isn't an automatic starter anymore. Yang, who's been linked away. Are you surprised Celtic have got to this stage in the window only 3.5 weeks before the start of those Champions League qualifiers and haven't properly strengthened that area?
But listen, it's not breaking news, David, that the Champions League playoff is fast approaching. And that's not something that's just suddenly been thrust in Celtic. They've known the date for a long time now. That said, we spoke to Brendan Rodgers the other day, and he did make the point that making signings is complicated. It's not there's no hard and fast rules in terms of how you get negotiations done. But Celtic have been in this position before. He spoke in January about being confident of the club making the signings he expected, and they didn't happen. They didn't get the players that Kyogo was allowed to go. They didn't get a replacement, and he ended up having to move Dyson Media through the middle, and it worked. But that was a risk. That was a risky move from Celtic as a club, and it didn't backfire. But as I say, Brendan Rodgers has been in this position before when he spoke confidently about what he expects to happen, and it hasn't happened. So yeah, as you say, that Champions League quality is fast approaching. Celtic have a £9 million striker in Adam but Brendan Rodgers doesn't speak about Celtic making a signing of a striker to be backup to Adam. You know, it's very much, I think he's looking for a striker to come in and be the number one striker. You mentioned the wide player, that's another huge position for Celtic. And I was actually really interested in the comments that Brendan Rodgers made last night on Yang. Yang started the game, did okay. We asked him about him post-match. Obviously, there was a story circulating on social media 2 days ago linking Yang with Norwich. There was a fake picture doing the rounds of Yang in a Norwich jersey. Now, there is interest from Norwich. There's interest from other clubs. But I found it very, very interesting that Brendan Rodgers was talking about Yang being a vital squad player as things stand. It was almost for me a message that he was sending out is, listen, if I don't get another winger in here, Yang's a guy who plays. Or certainly he's a guy who's going to play a lot of minutes. You say he's got James Forrest there, he's got other options, but Marco Tillio's not going to play for Celtic. I mean, he's still in this squad. Again, I wonder, in fact, I don't wonder that. I'm convinced that that's a message been sent out by Brendan Rodgers. When he's talking about Yang being an important part of the squad and how he's currently the guy who's starting for Celtic, you know, that's a message been sent out by the Celtic manager. If I don't get another winger in, or the kind of quality that I like, then this is a guy who's going to be starting a lot of games. He's not going to be starting James Forrest, for all that he's been a wonderful Celtic servant down the years, and we all know what James Forrest can do. He spoke about Yang in those terms, David, you know, and I thought that was very interesting.
In terms of, Robert, the new signings that you did mention, Kieran Tierney, Benjamin Nygren, both started in the Ajax game. Kieran Tierney had a huge role in Celtic's goal. Benjamin Nygren, thought impressed. Very gifted footballer. What's been your kind of assessment of those two so far?
Yeah, absolutely. Nygren, first of all, David, he's been impressive. He's looked a player, in all honesty. We thought that when he was signed, when we did the story that he was coming into Celtic, I think yourself did a bit of research on that, and he's looking the part. He really is. He's like an older head and younger shoulders. I think he's 23, 24, maybe just turned. He plays with a kind of an older head, as I say. He's a player who looks like he's got experience, even though he maybe doesn't. You know, I think in actual fact he made his debut for Gothenburg at 16. You know, this is a boy who has played a good number of games. Yeah, he has looked a shrewd signing. Brendan Rodgers, when we asked about him the other day, spoke in glowing terms in terms of how he thinks he's already improved his market value, you know, in just a matter of weeks, and how very much in his mind the Celtic have got a bargain buy in Benjamin Nygren. So yeah, I think he's going to be a good signing for Celtic. It'll be interesting to see actually where he plays in the team. He has played a couple of different roles, kind of sitting deeper alongside Callum McGregor, and I think, as I said, when we looked at him initially, when he came in, he's a player who has played in a kind of more advanced role. So I think he's got versatility about him. And I think he's certainly, someone who could be a big player for Celtic this season. Kieran Tierney, we've spoken about him a number of times in the last few months since it became clear he was coming back to Celtic. I think initially it was clear that he was a good way behind maybe some of his teammates in terms of fitness, in terms of just getting back up to speed. But yeah, last week against Newcastle, he was full of running. I think his delivery was excellent again, as we all know it is. And yeah, I think he's slowly but surely getting back up to speed. And I think, again, he'll be another solid signing for Celtic. There's no doubt for me in my mind on those two players, David. But as I say, and I think there still has to be some serious business done with Celtic. You know, they absolutely need a new striker. I think that's key for them right now. That has to be key for Brendan Rodgers. As I say, you watch the games. For me, I've watched the games so far in Portugal and over here, and obviously the Newcastle game as well. But Adam, for all that he's a hard-working big player, for all that he's got a physicality and a presence that maybe some other players don't have, and he scored 20 goals last season. For me, he's not going to be the player who starts the majority of the games for Celtic. Celtic will be signing a striker who's going to come in and be the main man. And it remains to be seen. It remains to be seen who that is going to be. But yeah, for me, that's key for Celtic. And as I say, we've touched on it also. Brendan Rodgers has made it clear he needs a new wide player. It'll be interesting, David. I don't know what you think on this. Daiza Maeda was excellent last night in the game. It was a bad result for Celtic. We'll maybe come on that in a minute. Daiza Maeda was impressive, lively. in that first half especially, I've still got an inkling that he may be someone that clubs are still looking at, and it'll be very interesting for me and how that develops in the coming weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. I mean, I think there'll be huge interest in Dyson Maeda, but what I would say on that is, given that Nicholas Kuhn's gone, and I'm sure there'll be other players that of clubs are looking at, like Rio Hatate, potential Alistair Johnson, guys like that. Celtic can't afford, Robert, in my opinion, to let anybody else go. And you touched on it. You touched on it as well. Yang, I mean, Brendan Rodgers is saying he can't afford to let Yang go, so the thought of letting Dyson Maeda go before this playoff is just, it's not going to happen, is it?
Yeah, but I think Brendan, absolutely, and that's the key to it before this playoff, and it depends a lot on how things transpire in that. And I think Celtic fans will be outraged at the idea of Celtic selling Dyson Maeda when arguably they're weaker now than they were before the season ended last season. But as I say, I wonder, I really do, whether or not, or how things are going to progress here and how things are going to develop there. There are clubs looking at Dyson Maeda. You know that as well as I do. The key will be what's going to happen in the Champions League playoff, and also what Celtic do between now and then in terms of players coming in. Wouldn't surprise me if Celtic try and get maybe a couple of wingers in, David. You know, we're concentrating on maybe one. I think Brendan Rodgers could be at least, not at least, but I think he could be looking to get maybe two in, with the idea that there will be interest in Dyson Maeda.
Just to touch on the game, obviously, it was a bit of a high score line in the end. Brendan Rodgers after the game said he didn't think it was a 5-1 game. Do you agree? Do you disagree?
No, I don't. It was fair comment, actually. Clearly a bad night for Celtic. Defensively, as I wrote in my match report this morning, they didn't cover themselves in any glory, but there was a few changes there. They obviously was trying to give minutes to certain players. Liam Scales didn't have a great night. Cameron Carter-Vickers came on. Obviously, he's coming back from a knock. Again, he looked like a player who needs minutes. They didn't cover themselves in any glory defensively, but it was a strange game. Celtic actually started the game really well. They imposed themselves in the game. Nygren and Callum McGregor initially controlled the game. But yeah, there was a switch in the game at kind of second half, and the goals that Celtic conceded weren't kind of great from Celtic's point of view. But yeah, it was a strange game. Brendan Rodgers was actually kind of right in what he said. It was one of those games we've all seen them pre-season that, you know, it ends 5-1, and you kind of wonder how it ended that way. Two of the goals, the kind of fourth and fifth were kind of worldies from an Ajax point of view. You know, they were really good goals hit from distance. But yeah, still not a great night from Celtic. They were expecting a better performance, and now means they've got the game tomorrow. The kind of third place playoff is essentially in this Como Cup, rather than playing Sunday against Como. But that's maybe not the worst thing. They'll go home on Sunday and they'll prepare for next week's Premiership opener.
And that game was quite a quick turnaround Thursday to Saturday. Do you expect a lot of changes? Cameron Carter-Vickers maybe got another 45 minutes. You'd imagine also some trusty guys like that will come in. Andy Engels maybe start. Yeah,
you would imagine so. It's one thing that Brendan Rodgers, I think, has been quite good at. He kind of gives the players the minutes they need. He's done that throughout. As I say, we were in Portugal for the games there that they had, and it was very much a case of getting minutes in the legs. The standards improved. They stepped up as the games have gone on. You know, Ajax were at a decent level last night. I think they're maybe a week, 10 days behind Celtic in terms of how far they've been back training. But yes, Ajax are a good quality team. You know, they played Newcastle again, obviously at the weekend. Celtic were excellent, but you know, I think one of the messages that came from Brendan Rodgers since then is that he's maybe wanting to temper the kind of expectation of how things are right now. You know, it was great to get that win over Newcastle at the weekend, and Celtic fans, I'm sure, were delighted about that. But maybe last night was a little bit of a reality check to a certain extent on where Celtic are right now. And from Brendan Rodgers' point of view, that maybe wasn't the worst thing. You know, he's made it very clear what has to happen in the coming days and weeks in terms of signings. So to lose by that scoreline to Ajax, albeit that he wouldn't want that to happen, it's maybe not the worst thing from the Celtic manager's perspective.
Robert, thanks as always for your time. You enjoy the rest of your trip to Como, stay out of the rain, and we'll look forward to reading all your stuff and listening to you over the next couple of days.
Yeah, a really illuminating interview there with David. Some really interesting stuff on Yang and Maeda there, and also the idea about Brendan Rodgers talking about ambition And does this look as though he's maybe applying a little bit of pressure to the Celtic board?
Yeah, look, you probably could interpret it that way. I suppose he's also just been honest. And I think if you look down at what Brendan Rodgers is saying about if you're ambitious, if you want to move forward as a club, you need to go and invest in quality. I don't think you'll find many Celtic fans out there who disagree. I suppose the question is, can Celtic get the quality that Brendan Rodgers thinks he needs to take the team forward, and can deals be done that Celtic feel is good value? And I'm sure we're going to see over the next couple of weeks, Craig, whether that happens or not. I do think Celtic will spend money. I think Celtic will probably spend big money. The difference, I mean, they did it last year. In the transfer window, the summer transfer window, you just need to look at Paulo Bernardo, Arne Engels, Austin Trusty, Adam Ida. It was big money. I know the flip side of that is Celtic got big money in for Matorelli. They've already got big money in this summer for Nicholas Kuhn. However, the main difference between now and then was that last summer Celtic were guaranteed Champions League football. They didn't have this tightrope of a Champions League playoff, which they do now. And as we spoke about, it's 3.5 weeks away now, and I think that has made this situation, if you want to call it that, in terms of Celtic squad strength at the top end of the pitch, far more pressing. The clock is ticking, as we said, down to this Champions League playoff, and I think most Celtic fans, and probably even Brendan Rodgers, would have felt that the squad would have been slightly stronger at this stage of the window.
What does that ambition look like? Is it two £10 million players? 3 or 4? How does that kind of
look? You can. I would never ever get carried away with transfer fees. Celtic could go and spend 50 million, or they could go and spend 20 million. I think you just have to get the right player. I think you need to get the right player, find the right deal that improves Celtic as a side. To be fair to Brendan Rodgers, he's spoken at length since he's been in Italy about transfers, about strategies, about who's in charge, who's not in charge, about the club's model and everything. And he said himself, he doesn't care if a player costs £1 million. Benjamin Negron was only £2 million. Celtic managed to find him. He looks as if already he's a huge asset for them. Kieran Tierney came in a free, okay, big package. I wouldn't get caught up in the Celtic need to go and spend another £11 million on an Arne Engels. They just need to find players that will improve the starting 11. And that's where I think most Celtic supporters out there, it's not just about Celtic have got lots of money, they've got more money coming in, let's go and break the transfer record again. I don't think it's about that. I think they just feel that in terms of recruitment they need to get it right, and they need to be pretty quick with it now, because the transfer window is ticking on, clearly. I don't want to use the word Celtic are getting desperate, but you're in a position where clubs will know that you need players in if they start the season, especially this Champions League playoff, and there's a big pot of money there. So it's complicated, it's not easy to get players in, I get that, but Brendan Rodgers clearly wants more, Celtic supporters clearly want more, and it's now up to everybody involved to deliver that.
One name that continues to be linked is Balikwisha. What's the latest on this move?
Yeah, look, again, it's been a constant theme. Celtic like Michel-Ange Balikwisha. Antwerp are ready to sell Michel-Ange Balikwisha. I don't know why it's not been done yet. The Belgian league starts Friday night. Antwerp will play Union Saint-Gilloise. As we record this, we don't know if he's going to feature or not. He is a player who I assumed a couple of weeks ago would have been signed by Celtic. I don't know why it's not happened yet. I don't know whether it's down to, as I say, we always talk about transfers, 3 parties involved, the buying club, the selling club and the player. I don't know right now why it's not been done. I think he's quite keen to come to Celtic. By all accounts, Celtic like him. But as I said, it's becoming more pressing, just I think in terms of preparation time for the Champions League qualifier. Because look, domestic football is always going to be Celtic's bread and butter, but if you look at the Champions League playoff this season, in seasons beyond this, it's probably going to be a bit tougher to get there, just in terms of Scotland's coefficient and more qualifiers, etc. This is a big chance for Celtic to A, get back in among Europe's elite, and that's the competition they want to be in, but also the riches that it brings, the money that it brings. It's a huge amount of money on offer, and I think Celtic, and listen, this will go for the board as well. This will go, I mean, there'll be a lot of board bashing going on just now, but you can't tell me everybody at Celtic doesn't want the squad to be in its best possible state going into those playoffs. But right now there's work to be done. Brendan Rodgers has been admitting that. That might include getting a deal done for Balikwisha, even if you need to pay a little bit more than you think. But I think we're now at the stage where if players are going to be really up and ready for that qualifier, they need to be in probably the next week to 10 days at the very, very latest.
Are Celtic in a little bit of a state of limbo? The squad is obviously good enough to compete and win titles domestically, but in order to take them to the next level in Europe, they're going to have to spend probably more than what the board would like.
Yeah, but that's look, the next level in Europe. What does that mean? I mean, Gordon Strachan always spoke about that during his era, and I know that was a long time ago, but I don't really think the situation has changed that much. He used to speak about, back then, spend X amount of money, and he always said, look, you could buy 3-4 players for 15 million. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get to the semi-final of the Champions League. I think Celtic have always been very clear that they want to get the best possible players. The accusation just now is that the board aren't spending enough money. But also, you speak about the state of limbo, and this is where I come back to the fact that it can be complicated, is that I dare say Celtic do have targets. They do have players that Brendan Rodgers wants, who right now might not want to fully commit until they know Celtic are 100% in the Champions League. And that leads to a kind of standoff position, because you might then be able to get number 2, number 3 in your list, who are happy to come just now, if it means Celtic in the Champions League or Europa League. Whereas there might be top targets, and look, what you better doing? Are you better taking the lesser player, or are you better gambling? It's a tricky situation, but I also and I have sympathy for any club in the situation where you might have to wait a little bit of time for your top targets, but you have this huge tie coming up. However, I don't think most Celtic fans will probably want to hear that excuse. They'll just be saying, get the deal done. And if it means paying that player who can get you to the Champions League a little bit extra, just get it done. I'm not sure it's as simple as that. And I'll reiterate again, I don't think there is an unwillingness from Celtic to spend big money. We saw it last summer that Celtic, I think, in the club account said they broke their transfer record twice. However, I think the fear is among Celtic fans, and maybe even Brendan Rodgers, that it comes too late for the Champions League, which is such a huge priority for Celtic.
That's what I was going to ask. Do you think, as the squad as it stands just now, is good enough to qualify for the Champions League and win that playoff? They've already played, Sporting Lisbon, Newcastle, and Ajax in pre-season. Where do you think the squad is in terms of being able to qualify for the Champions League?
I think it's potentially strong enough. We don't know, obviously, yet who Celtic will get in the playoff. However, I think Celtic at the top end of the pitch are weakened compared to last season. If you go back to January, Celtic had Kyogo, Maeda, Kun probably as the first choice front three. Kyogo leaves, Jota comes in, Maeda shifts in the middle. So they've probably, towards the second half of last season, Celtic's strongest front three was Jota, Maeda and Kun. Now, Kun's been sold for £17 million. Jota's injured, he's out, will not play. And it leaves, right now as things stand, Daisen Maeda as the kind of last man standing of that first choice three. Adamida is an £8 million striker. I think should be more than good enough, and is more than good enough to play a huge role in those Champions League playoffs. But I think beyond that, as we spoke about with Robert, the options in the wing, if you look at Jota and Kun, compared to what's there just now available, I think Celtic are weaker. I think everybody would admit Celtic are weaker. And it would be a huge gamble for Celtic to go into these playoffs with no reinforcements in that area. I would be amazed if that happened, but as Brendan Rodgers said, you need to show ambition, and maybe that will. I know Celtic, there's a view that Celtic overspent at times last summer, right at the end, where they got deals done, but maybe overspent in certain players. However, I do feel, and look, Celtic will know this, that they need to reinforce that area. There has to be at least one winger comes in before that playoff, potentially even two, because I just feel that if you want to be doubly sure that you can get over, it's going to be a really tricky playoff, then Celtic need reinforcements up there.
The draw for that playoff is on August the 4th, the week on Monday. You then got the game towards the end of August. It's, as you say, the clock is ticking.
Clock is ticking. As we spoke about, Robert's 25 days away for Celtic's first Champions League, first leg of that playoff. So yeah, look, that's the line in the sand. That's the target as things stand. And there's not much time to bed players in now. Get deals done. I think Celtic will have probably played 2 league games before then. They will also have a Premier Sports Cup game in between. So yeah, look, we're not. It's staring everybody in the face. Celtic need reinforcements. Brendan Rodgers saying that. The board will know that, and I can understand why fans are getting a little bit antsy over, right, where are these players? Because, especially with Nicholas Kuhn would start the Champions League playoff for Celtic. He's gone, Celtic allowed him to go. I think most people expected when Nicholas Kuhn left that there would be at the very least one direct replacement for him. It's not happened so far. So yeah, work to be done.
Yeah. Well, thanks, David, and thanks to Robert and Lake Como for all our insight today. And thanks to you, the viewers at home, for watching. Don't forget, there's lots of more great content on the Scottish SunSport YouTube channel. And to keep up to date on all the latest transfer rumours and gossip, you can, of course, keep across all our platforms.